David Grusch, the infamous UFO whistleblower, has really spearheaded a hell of a lot of transparency and disclosure, and even congressional hearings over the past few years has been brought into question again, but has been seemingly saved by Ask a Polls journalist Matt Laszlo with regards to his credibility within, well, basically everything. Now, obviously, as you're probably very well aware, David Grusch is the whistleblower that came forward to News Nation and Ross Coulthart back in 2023, I think it was. And he was part of the very first UAP congressional hearing later on that year, where he testified under oath, by basically talking about everything that he knew with regards to UAPs and the like, right? Now, his credibility was brought into question by someone called Marcus Wolf over on Twitter. And they stated he has had every opportunity to present his info to Arrow. He has declined. He was fired from the NGA. Not one thing he's claimed has ever checked out. Not one. He is a total loon. Prove me wrong. Now, obviously, people have been trying to discredit this man for a very, very long time, especially, ever since he first came out. But it would seem that he has the full faith and backing of Congress and the representatives within Congress. And that's, summarised by Matt Laszlo over on Ask a Poll very neatly in reply. So they stated, last we checked, Grusch was trusted by the Oversight Chair, James Comer, AOC, Jamie Raskin, Nancy Mace. You better contact all of their offices ASAP because there's been 2 years now of Congress investigating Grusch's claims in public and classified settings, and they all trust him. Now, just to hammer home this point that Grusch must be trusted in some capacity behind the scenes and by Congress, let's not forget that, there's been multiple articles that have indicated that UAP whistleblower David Grusch has officially been approved and accepted for the position to work on Congressman Eric Burleson's personal office staff. Grusch's title will be Senior Advisor and will be mostly advised on UAP/UFO related topics. And, it's a temporary role, yes, for 4 months, but it looks as if he's clearly been trusted by Burleson to be taken on in his personal staff to advise him at a senior level on UAPs and UFOs. And, just to kind of hammer home this point even further, there have been a multitude of UFO podcasts that Eric Burleson has been on recently, which clearly David Grusch may have potentially orchestrated or advised that he go on behind the scenes, where he kind of talks about David Grusch quite highly and David Grusch's role behind the scenes and the things that he's kind of indicated that he should go into.
When we had a meeting with oversight staff and Anna Polina Luna, we had a really productive meeting. Grusch, it was like drinking from a fire hose. He gave probably 20 different names of individuals, some that you've heard of, but most of them I've never heard of being discussed in the UFO community, and these are all people that have been read in on the programs, according to Grusch, and then some of them are retired, some of them are active. He also gave us an indication as to which ones will be hostile and which ones will not. So by hostile, what I mean is that they're not going to willingly come forward and provide information like he did. They're not, they don't want to talk about this topic. And if we were to bring them forward, they would probably say, I can't, or I don't recall, or I can't speak to that. Right. So that would be a hostile witness. So we want to get, there's some people that we may have to bring forward and subpoena to bring forward. And so that's kind of how that conversation went.
Now, obviously, that's one thing that David Grusch has done behind the scenes, but there's a multitude of other things that have gone on. Even going as far as Grusch introducing Eric Burleson to other people. Like, even talk about aliens and angels and crazy stuff like this that was mentioned on a Twitter space recently.
I believe that there's so much truth in the Bible. In fact, so I'll tell you guys something that I have. David Grusch put me in contact with an individual who blew my mind. I don't know if I can believe him, but it's an individual who has aliens talk to him. And And this individual went from being a an a Jewish person to being to being an atheist in his life when he started talking to what he calls his aliens, or angels. They started talking to him. He has these strange experiences, and then his wife will transcribe what he says, and a lot of it is predictions that come true. And what he told me is he became a Christian. He started believing in Jesus because these things that were talking to him said, yes, Jesus is real. Jesus, I mean, was a real person. He really did perform these miracles, and this guy, and he was the Messiah, and he is part of the divine council with God. And then a guy who didn't even know what the divine council was in the Bible suddenly was being told through some. Anyway, that was an interesting thing. So let me go back to your question. When you when you ask, like, all these ancient, like, megalithic sites like Machu Picchu, or the pyramids in the pyramids that are in, whether in the Aztec Empire, the Inca, and then you've got pyramids of Egypt. I mean, it's ubiquitous across the world, and some of these sites have got stone structures at their base that there's even modern technology and modern machinery would have a very difficult time putting in place and making it that perfect. It suggests to me that there were ancient civilizations that were extremely advanced. And what happens is you do, and I think Tim Alberino is right, like, you have cataclysm occur, whether it's a comet that hits, or it's the poles that the electromagnetic, the
Noah's
magnetic
Ark.
poles.
Noah's Ark, Eric.
Yes, and so it creates the Noah's Ark experience, right? And so if you read the Bible, pre-Noah was a pretty wild period in world history. And that pre-Noah period, you had, and this where it fits in with the UFO phenomenon, okay? And when David Grusch is telling me that there's a Nordic type of aliens that crossbreeds with humans and creates this crossbreed, in the Bible it describes this. In Genesis 6, it says the that basically angels looked down and lusted after the women of earth. They decided to come together, and they came down and they copulated with so basically they created hybrids, and the hybrids were called the Nephilim. And the Nephilim were considered giants or mighty men, basically demigods. And so the question is, like, when you hear this, it's like, it sounds like just wild, but it's in the Bible. But if you look through not just the Bible, but what about Greek mythology? You look at every, like, major historical document. It always goes back to these some tale about a god that comes down, creates a half breed, and then that half breed rules. And so, I don't like, to me, that's a fascinating overlap that consistently happens. And so what Tim Alberino says is that, look, the Bible describes angels as non-earth creatures. At the end of the day, that means they're alien. They're not from planet Earth. They're from somewhere else. And we tend to think of them as, like, ethereal, that they're just these, like, shadow type figures, but they do have physical form, because if you read the Bible, they have physical form. They often actually look weird because they're startling when people see them. And they always have to say, do not be afraid, when somebody sees them. So that tells you that they don't always look human. And so it's an interesting overlap with this whole, the history of um, our civilization, potentially.
Now, obviously, it's a very interesting thing that we've got going on here where people are still trying to discredit David Grusch, right? Some people watching this video may, have polarizing opinions on him. Some people may believe him, some people may not, and that's absolutely fine. But I think what's important to note here, and what Matt Lasler was trying to say, is why would these people have these, why would these people like Burleson, for example, Representative Burleson, have David Grusch at a senior advisory level if they didn't trust him or if his information didn't check out? It's food for thought. What do you guys think about all of this? Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. While you're down there, jump to get the hell out of that like button and subscribe. And until next time, I'll speak to you later. Peace.